delta G is delta H minus T delta S. So if delta H is negative and delta S is negative, then that means that since T is always positive, right? This thing's always positive. This is negative. So I have a negative and I'm subtracting a negative. So that makes a positive, right? So if the temperature is big enough, then delta G will become positive, right? Because let's say this is, in this case, this is negative 198.4, right? Over here, if the temperature gets high enough, then this can become positive 300 and something, right? So the higher the temperature goes, the less spontaneous this thing is, right? The way I remember this is if this is negative and this is positive, then it's always spontaneous, okay? If it's the reverse, then it's never spontaneous. So when the signs of delta H and delta S are opposite each other, delta H tells me, is it spontaneous, yes or no, okay? Delta G negative means spontaneous. So when they're opposite, delta H negative means spontaneous, okay? The problem comes when they're the same, when they're both negative or when they're both positive, okay? When they're both negative, in this case, just like this one, they're spontaneous at low temperatures. And when they're both positive, they're spontaneous at high temperatures, right? And so I equate minus signs with low and positive signs with high, okay? So as we increase the temperature, this thing becomes less and less spontaneous until eventually it becomes not spontaneous, okay? The temperature at which that happens, we can calculate as delta H over delta S, right? Because at equilibrium, delta G would be equal to 0, and that would be equal to delta H minus T delta S. And so we could write that as delta H is equal to T delta S, or T is equal to delta H divided by delta S. And solving this equation will tell me the temperature at which this thing becomes not spontaneous. And so let's find out what that is. We got values here. Delta H is negative 198.4. I'm going to go ahead and write this as 10 to the 3 joules, because it's kilojoules, right? And then here we'll have a negative 187.9 joules per Kelvin. So the joules cancel, and I'll be left with 1 over Kelvin, so my answer is going to be in Kelvin. And so you guys tell me, at what temperature does this thing become spontaneous? The negatives cancel out and give us a positive. 0.08, 0.88. 1055.88 Kelvin. So the current value of delta G they give us in the problem tells me that it will be spontaneous at this temperature. The fact that delta H and delta S are both negative tells me that it's only spontaneous at low temperatures. And so as we increase the temperature, it becomes less useful to me, right?